Watch the camera there.
Hi everybody, I hope you had a really good Christmas. Now, what I'm going to cover in this video, I present my flies or my lures in winter and more so in windy conditions. Now for me, I use mainly the floating line. I do use the sink and the intermediate. I haven't used the sink line for quite some time, but I mainly fish the intermediate or sink lines when I'm fishing with the lures. It's obviously because I'm stripping them in a lot quicker. Now the floating line covers probably 80% of my fishing, and that's throughout the winter. I'll even use my lures on the floating line because I want to fish them a lot slower. Sometimes I do pick the retrieve up and move them a lot quicker because the fish have come higher in the water. And a lot of the time I'm fishing more smaller patterns, imitative patterns. But there are a lot of factors that you need to consider when winter fishing. Now, as soon as we take up fly fishing, the first thing we got to do is learn to fly cast. So we learn to fly cast, but we learn just the basic fly cast. But I would encourage you to do more of the casting, even such as the roll cast. There are going to be times when you're on the water and you need to utilize more of your casting. For me, the back cast is a very important cast when you're in windy conditions. And again, learning to cast against the wind. Now, casting against the wind is certainly no harder. If anything, it's easier to cast into the wind than it is across the wind. Now, this is mainly because when you're going across the wind, you have a lot more wind affecting that line, as opposed to casting against the wind. Your line's like this and you're going directly, there's less wind resistance on your line going into the wind as opposed to across. The biggest problem I always see with most people when they are casting into the wind is that they are casting as though they're casting in the calm conditions, which is fine because you're aiming for bigger distances. When you want to cast a bigger distance, you keep the rod tip that bit higher, but as soon as you're facing stronger winds, you've got to keep that rod tip that little bit lower, and that will enable you to present a decent cast. You're not going to get casts that are going to shoot out those big distances, but so long as you can get a bit of distance to the cast, it all works fine. So what I've done is I've put together few small clips on the presentation of the line and the fly. So this is how I would be fishing in the wind, but it does give you more options to catch more fish.
So first of all, I will go through what most of us would do in these conditions. So we head for the windward bank and present the fly at an angle. We know we are safe casting this way, so as soon as our line lands, the wind picks it up and drags it, and this in turn pulls your fly towards the surface, and any retrieve you make brings it higher. Now this would be okay any other time of the year, certainly when you have surface food blowing in, but this is winter. There is little, if anything, on the surface. Most of the food now is deeper.
Okay, so just had a hell of a tangle. It's the sort of thing you're going to expect when you're in conditions like this, but as I say, what does help, I've got my braid on, my 5-foot braid, and I've shortened the tippet, and that does help. Now the thing is, when you cast into the wind like this here now, obviously the wind isn't going to pick that fly line up or as much, so you've got a lot more control with that as to what depth you fish, the speed of the retrieve, and it doesn't get affected by the wind. So if the fish are a bit lower and you're on that floating line, you can actually allow it to sink. So what I'll do is just put a cast out again. Right, cast out, stand directly in front of it, and that line, as you can see with the tippet, is hardly moving. I'll straighten that out again, and that is hardly moving then. So I'm slightly off to the wind. I should be casting more to my left. That'll be more into the wind then. So now I've got direct contact to the fly. Just that slow figure of 8. So what I'll do is just put it a bit more into the wind. Okay. So as you can see now, the wind's unable to pick that line up. So it'll give me the option to go a lot deeper. And if I want to come a bit higher, just pick the retrieve up a bit. Or if you want a slower retrieve and keep it higher, just come slightly onto the wind. So the wind's then picking your line up a bit. But as I say, you can use this wind to your advantage by either casting in or the angle you are to that wind, and obviously the more cross wind you are, the quicker the line's going to be picked up and the higher you are in the water. Now, as it was just a moment ago, the fish seem to be a bit higher in the water, so I'll either cast into the wind and retrieve a bit quicker, or I can go more across the wind, and that'll do it for me. That wind is getting stronger. Okay, this is, up this end, a lot more comfortable. I've got a bit of protection, we've got the hedge and all this lot here, so it's a lot more comfortable. Again, the cast, you've got to be careful, even though it's not as strong up this end. It's still very gusty, so if you're right-handed, that cast, you know, you've got to watch what you're doing. So keep your glasses on, keep your hoods up, and if you can, and you've got to go across that way, back cast is the way to go. And that there then, lovely cast.
What you will notice here as I'm performing this back cast is I'm keeping the rod tip down as low as I possibly can.
God, that's strong wind that.
Now in that clip, the wind was a bit stronger than ideal. Now this was due to another factor, and this factor is very important to understand, but it is complex, but it's worth knowing the basics of it. So I will go through this with you on the next video. Now, with a lot of what I have been going through and what I will be going through, being that it's more complex, there's going to be a lot of things that you may want answers to. So The easiest way to get around that one is to subscribe to the channel, comment, and then I can then in turn get back to you. So as I've said, the next video will be based mainly on this factor, the importance of it, and how it'll help you improve your fishing. I'll also go through a few of the patterns that I'm using. So take care, look after yourselves, and here's some bits from the next video.
Oh yes. God, that looks not a bad fish neither. Yes. Oh blimey, it's just in the cast, it's a bomb. Go on, put this stick. Look at that. There, look at that. There, yeah. Unbelievable. Dead jump with that one. That hammered it.